This is the Doing Scary Things podcast. I'm Katie. I'm a veteran photographer, a serial entrepreneur, an aspiring author, and a relentless optimist. I'm a slow-talking, deep thinker from the Appalachian Mountains.
I'm Anna. I'm a prodigal musician, an accidental psychotherapist, and I'm living life mostly by experiment and endless curiosity. I'm a redheaded speed talker from a Midwestern farm town.
The purpose of this podcast is to talk to people who are doing some pretty scary things in their life about what it takes for them to push past fear and keep themselves going every day.
We'll also unpack the vulnerable things we're pursuing in our own lives and hopefully offer encouragement to you wherever you are on your journey.
Man, that was brilliant.
Hey everybody, this is part K of the first episode of the Doing Scary Things podcast. Here's a little bit of Katie's story.
Tell us about yourself and where you came from. I grew up in a really small town in Northeast Tennessee. It was kind of a mountain town. It was right off of the Appalachian Trail, which I didn't realize at the time how cool that was. I just was sort of like really removed from it. So I would see these people in town and kind of smell them and I just knew them as the hikers, and that was sort of my introduction to outdoorsiness. But anyway, yeah, super small town, really great place to grow up, small high school. And because of that, there were exactly 2 art classes in that high school, Art 1 and Art 2. Art 1 was required, which I took. I can't draw well, so I thought, I guess I'm not meant to be artistic. Through a really kind of strange series of events, I ended up going to a liberal arts school that was really close to my hometown called Milligan College. And it was also a really small school. And they had a photography program, which when I realized that, I thought, that sounds so fun. I didn't know that was a thing, a career, a job, anything like that.
Right.
But you had to declare it your minor to get even in the class, either your major or your minor. And I didn't have a minor at the time, so I said, cool, I'll minor in it. I mean, that's not that huge of a commitment. It'll be a hobby. It'll be for fun, that kind of thing. And got in that class. Worst grades I've ever made in my life.
Wow.
I made very low C's because so much of it that I didn't think about that before. It was so technical and it was definition tests and it was all these things that were completely foreign to me that I did not know anything about. And so it took me really years to get to where I felt proficient in photography. But fast forward, 15 years and that became my livelihood. That was, other than one other job I had out of college, that's what I've done as an adult. I am a professional photographer. I have a wedding and portrait business here in Atlanta now. I've been here for the past decade, and that's where I met Anna. But I think that is all an important part of my story because over the course of the years of being a photographer, I can't tell you how many times people have said to me, I wish I could do what you're doing. And you have such an exciting life, and I wish I had your eye, and I wish I had your talent. And the reason that is all so bizarre to me is because I remember taking those first classes and it being completely foreign. Nothing ever at any point felt like a natural gift I had been given.
Right.
It wasn't.
It can look that way after 10 years of experience, but...
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
You're quite a bootstrapper.
Well, and there are quite a few things about it now that I would say come naturally, and then I'm like, wait, what does that even mean?
Right.
But it's effortless now. I've done it thousands of times.
Right.
So I think through the course of that career and people saying those things to me and really just thinking about that a lot, it really shaped my outlook on life. A lot of times when people would say things like that to me, and of course I know they were trying to compliment me, they were being so sweet. But what it was doing to me is honestly, I was dying inside a little every time somebody would say that, because they would say things like, oh, it must be so cool to do what you love. And it must be so cool to do that thing that you're most passionate about. Don't get me wrong, photography has given me so many opportunities and I'm so grateful for it. It's still a huge source of my income. I'm still running the business. I'm still shooting weddings. But there was this other thing.
Yeah.
That had actually been what I'd always wanted to do. So to rewind to that, from the time I was a little girl, like as early as I can remember, I sang and I wanted to sing, and I sang in church, and I think I didn't realize it at the time. But I really had a very musical family.
Yeah.
My grandfather is one of the best guitar players I know. And
you know a lot of guitar players.
I do know a lot of guitar players.
That is not to be taken lightly at all.
He is about to turn 90 this month, and he plays every single day still.
Yeah.
And I took that for granted because, when you're a kid, you just assume every family's like yours.
Right.
And like everybody's like your family. And
oh, man.
so yeah, he's an amazing guitar player. He sings. My mom is an amazing singer. She is the choir director at her church and has been since I was a baby and as long as I can remember. My sister used to sing and compete in singing, and she's quite a bit older than me, so she had kind of already gone down that route. And, my mom gave me piano lessons since I was a young kid, and then I would go to other people for piano lessons. And again, I think I just always took that for granted. And at the same time, for some reason, I never felt like it was a viable option for me.
Yeah, like it's interesting that you're like, on some level I took that for granted, but on the other hand, that didn't lead you to like seamlessly transitioning into a musical career or lifestyle. Like It was the opposite.
Yeah, it really was and has been the opposite, even in my adult life, now being married to a musician. It's like being so close to somebody who is doing it can be really counterintuitive. It can be really paralyzing.
Really discouraging.
Yeah, sort of,
Yeah.
And like my sister, traveled and did competitive singing and was in the band. And I think this is good parenting really, but I think my parents, they never said to me like, don't you want to do this because your sister did it, But I think in my little mind, I just took that as like, if I was good enough to do this, it would be encouraged kind of thing,
Right. It's like maybe there was some assumption there that they saw your sister and like chose her and encouraged her on that path.
Yeah, and it sounds so crazy to talk about it like this because at the time, that's not what it felt like. And I know that that's not what they were doing. But somehow in my crazy mind, that's how it got.
Right.
That's how I interpreted it and I internalized it.
Exactly.
And, there was a point, it was like my biggest interest from birth. So probably 7 years old on a playground, I had found this group of girls and I had convinced them that we were going to have an all-girl rock band. And that's the way we were going to spend our time on the playground.
Was I one of those girls?
I wish. It might have actually happened.
I was in a cornfield somewhere else.
It's one of those memories that you like remember randomly as an adult and you're like, oh my gosh, this happened. But like, I remember going home so excited and, saying, this is what we're going to do on the playground and I need an instrument. And not being given an instrument. Because let's face it, like, how serious of an ass does that sound like?
Right.
I'm literally in like first grade saying I'm going to play an instrument. Like, I couldn't have even taken that to school, But in my mind, it was so real. And I never asked again.
In your mind, you were on cloud 9 ready to kick off this girl band. And then you were like,
so real.
I know what my destiny is. This is what I need. And no one really responded to that.
Yeah.
Yikes.
And honestly, again, like I'm thinking of how my parents would hear this. And it's like, I gave them no reason to think that was what I wanted.
Right.
I was very good at not putting myself out there, I guess, in that regard.
Well, sure. And like, especially with enthusiastic little kids, like who knows if that was just some other whim. But it
Yeah.
turns out it wasn't.
Yeah.
Like, it was really powerful to you.
Yeah. And like I said, I mean, we had a piano in our home.
Right.
My mom had a guitar, so I was given piano lessons. I learned and played the organ at my church for several years. I was given guitar lessons with my grandfather, using my mom's guitar. But again, it just seemed like that wasn't mine.
It's not
It never
you.
seemed like
Yeah.
my real identity. It was like these things are at my disposal. Let alone a viable career path. It's just not really even something that I should even spend my time on because it's just not my path. I don't know how I got there. That's just kind of
Yeah.
how I grew up feeling about it. Sang all in church. Never got up the guts to sing like at my high school talent show. Always wanted to. Always thought about it. Practice songs. Like,
I was
never
going to say,
did it.
did you ever fantasize and pick out
Girl,
songs and stuff?
What was it? It was a Leanne Rimes song.
Yes.
What was it? Surely it wasn't How Do I Live?
I
Oh
was
my
really
gosh.
hoping that it was. Or Can't Fight the Moonlight from Coyote Ugly.
No, that is really risque. Come on.
Talent show. Show you all my talents.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Nope. So there's some graces in the fact that never happened. But the other thing I did, so both my brother and sister were a lot older than me, and I spent a lot of time alone, like in my middle school, high school years. And that's when I really started writing. I called them songs because that's what they were to me. I only had the melody in my head, I had no way of figuring anything else out at that point. But I had the melody in my head. I was writing these songs. At one point, I made a website where I posted the lyrics to all these songs. And actually, it was like, that sounds like such a childish thing. And so it's really funny when I say that was actually one of the first conversations I ever had with Dan, who later became my husband, is like, he had seen the website and he was asking me about it. And,
wow.
He's got his own story, and I think we'll have him on here at some point to talk about it. But he grew up playing piano by ear, and actually all of the teachers he ever had gave up on him because they realized that they couldn't teach him.
They're like,
they didn't know how to teach him because he would hear the song and play it. So he wasn't doing it as a profession either. I mean, we were in college when we met. He was playing at church occasionally. But yeah, never would have dreamed that either of us would have, had anything to do with music as an adult through our dating years and even our early married years.
I want to ask you a question really quick about that because I had a similar situation with John when I first met him. One of the things we talked about the night we met was me and my best friend from high school. We were about to start rehearsals for our girl band. We literally did have an all-girl band.
Yeah, when you were in high school, right?
Yeah, and it was so fun. I met John when he was on tour, so he was fully, obviously already a really legit musician, you know? And I was kind of like a noob. When we talked about it that night, I remember feeling like, hey, you and I, we're not so different, we're kind of the same. And
she's making like a mobster motion with her hands.
Let's forget about it.
I'm not real sure what's happening.
But it just felt like I didn't feel super insecure about that. When I talked to him about it, I felt like, oh, this is exciting. He thought it was really cool. I didn't have that crippling sense of self-doubt that I somehow came into later when I really started. Really, for me, it was just comparing myself to him and his skill level. But it sounds like you and Dan had the same kind of thing where it was like, that's cool. I've seen your website. You have songs. And I play by ear. And we're kind of on this even playing field in a way, just discussing it. And then somewhere along the line, it's like, oh, you're the musician and I'm not. Right?
That is interesting. It was kind of like what you were talking about earlier. I think I had it in my head that duh, everybody wants to do music and not everybody gets to. Or, maybe you were supposed to be born with something, and then if you were good, everybody's going to encourage you, which I'm sure happens. But
yeah,
I know, now I know so many stories of it not happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
people, contrary to my belief as a child, other people's world doesn't revolve around seeing something in me and encouraging that.
You don't say.
Like, people got a lot going on.
In a child's mindset and in their experience.
Even in adults. Come on.
Yes.
If somebody,
Preach.
how many times, I have so many musician friends and my heart breaks for them, but it's like they'll share a song and people won't say anything.
Yeah.
Like, if I freaking email you a song, at least have the decency to listen to it and try to say something nice.
Silence is the worst.
But it's like, they didn't do that on purpose. They weren't trying to be mean.
Yeah.
They just got stuff going on. But when you're relying on that for your identity, frankly, or for them to tell you your purpose or to give you some sort of
validation
permission,
it's rough. It's really rough.
It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So, we had that conversation early on. I remember him, there was this one specifically, and he had said, that's really cool, and, asking me questions. And I think I probably just kind of downplayed it. Because at that point, I had put that aside so many times. I thought being a grown-up and, picking a career, you're not going to get everything you want. It's like, I want to do these things, but it's
like, that's not realistic.
That's not real.
Right.
Yeah. I literally remember at Milligan to take a vocal class was $75 in addition to the tuition. Now, my tuition was paid for. My parents paid for everything. I let that $75... It wasn't just that. I was terrified.
Yeah,
I was terrified to go in and again, it didn't feel like my identity. I was going to have to admit to people, I want to do this and I'm a beginner. Yeah, of course. I'm 18. That's not that big of a deal,
But that was some of those quote unquote reasons I was talking about earlier.
Absolutely.
$75 is a reason.
It's a reason.
Yeah.
It's a reason not to do it. It's something standing in the way. And it's we let the smallest things talk us down. So at that point, meeting Dan and I wasn't going to pursue music. That just wasn't even, it was something I loved. I had loved for my whole life, wanted to do it. Honestly felt not a natural talent, but this natural draw to it,
sure.
Who when they're 16 sits at home and writes songs?
Me.
Probably, right. There's a lot of us, but it's certainly not everybody.
No, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I didn't have the knowledge to know that about myself at that point.
That's exactly what you're saying. Everyone would do this if they could or whatever. That, it makes so much sense why you would be working from that belief,
And I remember several times throughout my 20s having to have another gut check moment because it was no, I buried this.
Yes.
Excuse you. Why is it coming back up?
You.
And the really funny thing, and we'll get there, is over the last couple years, my journey of actually letting myself do this, I have found notes we moved about 3 years ago. And so cleaning out the closets and that whole, mess. But I have found little pieces of paper in so many notebooks that it's anytime I would write goals down for myself.
Yeah.
It was get good at playing guitar.
Yeah.
Write songs. I know there was one year, that it was get Dan to help me record a song. It was all these things I was grasping for of this isn't possible and it's not a reality for me, but what do I have at my disposal that I could do?
Yeah.
And it was more so a list of honestly, to be really creepy, it was kind of before I die.
Yeah.
I just want to say that I finally practiced guitar and got okay at it.
Right.
But it was with every passing year.
Yeah.
I feel that's what it was. It was I would do this kind of every year. With every passing year, it just feels so terrible to look at that list. The list hasn't changed. And yet you're no, of course I didn't have time to do that.
Right.
You're mad at yourself for not doing it, but it's I'm never going to have time to do that. That's not my career.
Right.
That's not...
Right. Which makes sense why you're like, excuse you, I thought I buried this. Like,
yes,
we've already
I tried
established.
to bury it. That should probably be the main point of this is like,
yes.
in my head, when I made the decision, I decided I wasn't going to pursue it.
Yes.
When I was probably, I made the decision several times, but I started making that decision in high school. So when I was not in my 20s anymore and had pretty much seen a little bit of success in my photography business. I had kind of made some goals for myself and I'd hit all those goals. And it was exactly like what you were saying earlier. It was kind of like now what?
Yeah.
Like every year looks exactly the same for a wedding photographer.
Right.
You've got an insane spring/summer. And then the month of October, just, you're just not going to see anybody for personal reasons. You're going to work crazy hours.
Yeah.
And then you get some breathing, and it was just like this carousel wheel every single year. And it was like, I would find myself ramping up for it. Like, okay, I know what to expect now. I've done this 5 years. I've done this 6 years. I've done this 7 years. Every year is exactly the same.
Yeah.
And it just got to the point where it was like, I still want to do this. It was so inconvenient for me.
Oh, it is, though.
It would have been easier.
Yeah.
I will say it that way. It would have been easier for it to just have died.
Yeah. Well, and the safe, it's like, I think we did get to the exact same crossroads, like our own version of the same crossroads, where it's like you have to admit to yourself the safe and sensible thing is not satisfying. Which is so flipping ironic because the reason we chose the safe thing was because it was satisfying our need for safety. But then we're like,
right.
I have other needs? Wait, what? Like,
yes.
That is gonna be a problem.
Yes.
And it is a problem.
It's such a problem.
It's so inconvenient. That's so true.
The other thing that is so funny, our paths really are so similar.
I know. It's crazy.
It's really crazy. We had moved to Atlanta. Dan was working as a security guard and tried to transfer here as a security guard. That didn't work out. Random, string of events, and he got connected with a band down here and, went for it. And he had those skills already. He would tell you, he had to learn a lot in a really short amount of time. He had to figure out in-ears. He had never sung live.
Yeah.
And they threw him on stage in front of a record label audition, and he was expected to sing BGVs. The craziest stuff, right? And he was thrown in, and he did amazing at it. And so over the course of the years, he, started his own band, and we started going down that road. And, I was very much not just okay with being okay, I'm going to go shoot 1 million weddings so that we can live and you pursue this. It was the only option in my mind.
Yeah.
And when I asked you that question about, was that a conversation you had? It's when we, years later, when we're unpacking all this and trying to figure out how we got to where we are, I never talked about that with him.
Yeah.
And that was, and probably if I had, he would not have let me go down that road. I was even doing other kinds of photography. I was doing a lot of really fun work, in my opinion, creative work.
Totally.
And realizing that, bands didn't have a budget to pay me. Shocker. And so who did have a budget to pay me? Brides, and it's I love my wedding clients, and I've always strived to bring that same creativity into the way I shoot a wedding. And I've really tried to connect with those people and give them everything I have to give. But if I'm being honest, I made that decision based on money.
Totally.
And that got me to a point where it was so I'm making money, but everything else feels wrong.
Right. Which is very inconvenient.
It's so inconvenient.
It's very hard to admit to yourself.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
It is.
Well, and not to be too much of a therapist about this, but I think it's really incredible. And this is not a covert brag either. I feel like I definitely felt that same way about John and his music career, the way you felt about Dan. But I feel like you're just like, you were on another level with it, with sort of being the champion of like, Dan, this is your like calling, like you're made to do this, you know, like we'll do whatever we've got to do to like make this work, you know, and make it happen and keep it going and keep growing it. And like, you've just been so instrumental in that whole thing. It's interesting to me that you're saying, you know, but we never really had a conversation about that. I'm thinking like, where does that come from? Like, well, maybe it comes from, you know, the kid who feels like nobody ever noticed the thing she was made for and encouraged it. Like, you're giving him what you've always needed, you know, and that's just like so powerful. I love that on the flip side of that, here we are with this really important goal to encourage everyone to take up for themselves. Not that it's wrong to be super supportive of your husband's music career, like it's awesome. And I'm sure he wouldn't be where he is without you. To me, that just goes to show that the whole power of like what happened, like where we did come from. And like, that's like one little way to see, like to trace the impact, you know?
Yeah. Well, and thanks for saying those things. I feel like I need to take up for Dan a little just because it's like, yeah, I was doing those things and I do realize now where that came from.
Yeah.
Julia Cameron writes on creativity a lot and she calls it a blocked creative. She basically says that this sort of relationship isn't uncommon because it's like if you're not living sort of in your destiny or in that life pursuing the things you want to do, you subconsciously start encouraging somebody else close to you down that route.
Right.
And so I mean, Dan and I have been married over 13 years, and I've pushed him in ways that probably he didn't want to be pushed. and I know now that that's where that came from.
Yeah.
And so I'm not, and it wasn't always for the best.
Yeah.
The flip side of that, and I think one reason, you know, that we could get ourselves in this position is he was doing the same for me. Marriage is so complicated, right? But
indeed,
it's like he saw photography as my passion. He had every reason to see that. I, you know, was living that. And most days I'm sure would have said that and even thought that.
Yeah.
So he spent a decade of his life working for my business.
Yeah.
Like he was doing all the editing. We have multiple photographers, and for a few years he did all of that editing. He still does my video editing. So we've always worked together for one thing.
It's symbiotic.
Yeah. And so like with his music career now, I do still have a really supportive role in that. And it's almost like I don't know how to not do it.
Yeah.
I'm a 2 on the Enneagram. I'm a helper. Like I don't know how not to help, and I want to be involved in it.
Yeah.
And so I think we've gotten to a healthier place. But yes, like all those years ago, it was like he was helping me, I was helping him, but at the same time, we were both kind of just not really helping each other probably in the ways we should have been.
Yeah. And I mean, you're so right. Marriage is complicated. And I think it's really interesting now too, like maybe we'll have to revisit this topic from the lens of like where we are now, because again, you know, kind of a similar boat with my husband. Like I'm sure he fully believed like psychology was my lifelong passion and everything. Like he thought it was what music actually is for me, because I definitely led him to believe that.
Yeah.
And not
he borrowed a lot of money and went to school for it. And spent a lot of time learning and getting really good at it.
And talked about it. And I am interested in it, but it's like he couldn't, like it would have been really crazy for him to have assumed anything else or to have, you know, deduced anything else based on how I was handling my own life. So like, you know, it's not like they should have seen it. Like we didn't even see it. So it's like, how the heck were they supposed to see it?
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like, in the one hand, I'm in my head thinking, well, nobody's encouraging me to do this thing. And it's like, my own husband doesn't even know I want to do it.
Exactly.
That's how little I've talked about it.
Yeah, exactly.
There's just so many layers. And so even talking through starting.
So many barriers.
Yeah, but like us releasing this album and you know, figuring out like are we going to call ourselves a band? Like, because for the 2 years that we were just writing songs and keeping it to ourselves, that was pretty sweet. I loved it.
Yeah, it was great.
And it was, I think for me, it was enough. And I think that's an important part. I think that's going to be very helpful.
Yeah.
But because I have sort of been in this world a while, I've also, it's like, I feel like I owe it to you, but I also feel like I owe it to these songs to at least be released into the world.
For sure.
And, you know, it is what it is. And so I feel like I'm about to throw them out to the wolves. And I think what John and Dan both stressed to us the whole time, and what, you know, we've had to kind of stress to ourselves, is like, anything from this point, like anybody's reactions, anybody's, you know, whatever if they reference it in a way we would prefer them not to reference it, like a genre or whatever, it's like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We did this for ourselves, and that's where we're kind of reaping the benefits.
Yeah.
And we're gonna keep doing it no matter what.
Oh, yeah. And I feel like we've, I don't know, like protected ourselves, or like at least managed our expectations pretty well by having that experimental philosophy. Because we're like, well, we'll just take the next step and then decide, do we want to take the next step and do that experiment, or do we not? You know?
Yeah.
And so far it's been like yes, yes, and more yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, we very well could get to a point where we're like, I'm good here, you know?
Yeah.
But I think it's really cool that, you know, just to see how far down this road we've gotten by starting and having the permission and
giving ourselves the permission.
That's right, girl. Well, I want to circle back really quick to like your story, if there's anything else that you think is really vital.
I think there was a moment around the time I turned 30 where it was, I was sort of looking back on my life and all of those times that I had just kind of pushed it down, and realizing like, oh my gosh, like I blew it. I could have done it. I think just watching other people do it, and they weren't doing it perfectly, but they were doing it. Yeah, I think that was kind of what all kind of led to this thing of like, I don't care, like I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it in some capacity.
And it kind of doesn't matter how qualified you are.
It doesn't matter if I, you know, like, who am I doing it for?
Yeah.
I think I finally got that really weird message to myself of like, I can do it for myself, or I can do it for nobody.
Yeah.
And like we were talking about, I can continue not doing it.
Yeah.
And live with this. Because it really was, for me, it was, I don't know if everybody feels this, but it was just like this burden.
It was crushing.
It was just like, it was there. Like, and so I have to believe that everybody's got something.
Yeah.
And you can see it in people's eyes sometimes. You know, we were talking about the conversations I've had with people of like, oh, if I could do anything, I would do this, you know? And not everybody is like wears their heart on a sleeve like that. And not everybody can go that personal right away. But like, some people know straight out like what it is. And to live with that kind of regret, like it's just too much. And so it just got too much for me. And it was like, well, I'm probably going to look like an idiot to, you know, because it's, again, we paint ourselves in these lights on social media. Like, I'm a photographer, you know. And so it's like to step back from that and say, well, I'm still going to keep this business going. I have to for my livelihood. It's still a priority. It's still very important to me, but I'm going to pursue other things too.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so bad, and people in my life know this. It was so bad that I didn't even say what that was for a long time.
Yeah.
I am writing a book. That was a lot easier for me to say out loud than to say I'm going to write songs and record them. And which is insane because I don't have any more credibility to write a book than to write music.
Right.
I mean, if anything, I probably have less. You know, I don't know anybody personally who's written a book.
Yeah.
And I have been in the music business in some capacity for a while now.
Yeah,
you know, I've seen
true.
the insides of it. So,
And more nitty-gritty details of your story are going to be in that book, by the way.
yes,
So
that's true.
that's important to note also that, there is a lot more to both of our stories. Like, believe it or not, we have concisified a lot.
We've tried.
Here. We have tried. And there will be editing. But it's like, I feel like that's so rich and so important because other people who haven't started, whatever it is, they need to know that in many ways, we are at least one example that you can start. And that's it,
And you don't need anything from the world. You don't need an award or anything to say it was worth you starting. Like that feeling of giving yourself permission is really the best.
Well, and one of my favorite things, one of my favorite concepts from your book is that doing that thing doesn't mean that you magically leap into a career doing that thing.
Right.
But it also doesn't mean that you have to diminish it in your mind to just a hobby.
Right.
Like you can be pursuing the thing wholeheartedly and still not be making a dime from it and it still counts. Like that is a foreign concept, I think.
Well, it counts because you're getting the benefits from it. I think that's what it is that keeps so many people from starting.
Yeah.
Like we have this idea that if I can't achieve some level of success or if I can't be the best, why would I even try?
Right.
I love a good music documentary. I have watched all of them.
So many.
And it's like nobody told them when they were little that they were going to be, you know what I mean? Like they had just as much risk as anybody. So it's like, it can happen. But even if it doesn't, don't let that keep you from starting.
Totally. Shout out to all the fellow perfectionists out there. I think we're the most...
It's like bleeding out of me, the perfectionism.
No, I mean, I definitely classify myself that way also. But it's like, I feel like as perfectionists, we're especially prone to that kind of thinking.
I just don't want anybody to feel like they've missed the boat. Like if you're 70 and you feel this way, my heart breaks for you because... I only felt that for 30 years, but like if you have another day to live, like you have another day to begin. Yeah. Honestly, we had a friend who died really young. He was in his 20s. It really puts things in perspective. Any of us, we're not promised tomorrow. Like any of us could die at any time. It's not like, how about you diminish this idea until you're retired and then maybe you'll have money to try it. You might, but you might not have your health at that point. Or,
like don't bank on that.
Don't wait. You only have one life. It's really up to you how you choose to spend it.
Thanks for listening to Part K, The Most Beautiful Dream. If you like what you've heard today, please take a second to leave us a review on iTunes. Remember to tune in next week when I talk to Katie about her book and we make a really special announcement.
You're not recording this, are you?
Yeah.
Oh.